The crimson sand of Carval Prime drank human blood for the first time in its 3 billion-year history. Captain Rhea Corrin fell to her knees, 3 barbed arrows piercing through her chest plate. The ceramic armor had slowed them, but not enough. Her breathing came in shallow gasps, each one sending fire through her ribcage. Around her, the hunting party of Karvash warriors circled like predators who had finally cornered their prey. "The human dies," growled the lead hunter, notching another arrow. "Let the Galactic Council see what happens to those who protect abominations." Behind Rhea, huddled against the canyon wall, were the things she'd been sent to evacuate. 7 Karvash cubs too young to have their claws, abandoned by their own people for bearing genetic imperfections. The Karvash Empire had deemed them unworthy of life. Rhea had deemed them worthy of rescue. Blood trickled from the corner of her mouth, but she smiled anyway. That infuriating human smile that had confused aliens across 100 worlds. "You'll have to go through me first." The hunters laughed, a sound like grinding stone. Then the smallest cub, Vrek, barely reaching Rhea's waist, did something unprecedented in Karvash history. He reached up with trembling paws, grasped the arrow shaft protruding from her chest and pulled. Rhea screamed. The arrow came free with a wet sound that made even the hardened warriors flinch. Vrek held it in his small paws, his amber eyes blazing with something the Karvash had forgotten existed in their cubs. Defiance. "Let's return it first," Vrek said, his voice high but steady. The other 6 cubs moved forward, forming a protective semicircle around the fallen human. One picked up Rhea's dropped rifle. Another grabbed the combat knife from her belt. They were children, barely able to hold weapons meant for adult hands, facing warriors who had hunted apex predators across a dozen worlds. The lead hunter's mandibles clicked in amusement. "The defectives protect the human?" "This is..." Vrek threw the arrow. It wasn't a skilled throw. The arrow tumbled through the air, barely traveling 15 feet before clattering against a rock. But it was enough. The hunters stopped laughing. "You taught us something," Vrek said, his voice carrying across the canyon. "The human. She taught us that being small doesn't mean being weak, that being different doesn't mean being broken." He bared his tiny fangs. "She taught us that sometimes the galaxy needs someone crazy enough to stand when they should run." Rhea coughed, managing to prop herself up on one elbow. "Vrek, no. Run." "You said humans never abandon their pack," the cub replied without looking back. "You said it's what makes you dangerous. What makes you human?" He picked up a sharp rock. "We are your pack now," the hunters advanced. They had centuries of combat experience, weapons forged in the Empire's greatest furnaces, and the casual cruelty of those who believed might made right. What they didn't have was a human's contingency plan. Rhea's hand found the detonator at her belt. She'd placed the charges when they first entered the canyon, hoping she'd never need them. Human military doctrine was simple. Always have an exit strategy, and if that fails, make sure the enemy can't follow. "Vrek," she wheezed. "When I say run, you run, understand?" The cub's ears flattened, but he nodded. Rhea looked at the approaching hunters and smiled that smile again, the one that had made a Karvash merchant once say that humans smiled the way predators bared their teeth. She pressed the first trigger. Explosions ripped through the canyon walls above the hunters. Tons of rock began to fall, and suddenly the hunters were no longer advancing but scrambling backward, their perfect formation dissolving into chaos. "Run!" Rhea roared. The cubs bolted, and despite the arrows in her chest, despite the blood loss that made her vision swim, Rhea Corrin forced herself to her feet and ran too. Behind her, the canyon filled with dust and screaming and the sound of stone meeting stone. They made it to the extraction point 17 minutes later, a lifetime in combat seconds. Rhea collapsed against the emergency beacon she'd planted, her fingers barely able to activate it. The cubs surrounded her, their small bodies pressed close, trying to keep her warm as shock set in. "You're good kids," Rhea managed, her voice fading. "Gonna be amazing adults." "The ship is coming," Rex said urgently, his paw pressing against her wounds in a futile attempt to stop the bleeding. "The human ship. They'll fix you. Humans can fix anything, right? You said humans are too stubborn to die." Rhea laughed, and it turned into a cough that brought up blood. "Sometimes stubbornness isn't enough." "No," Freck's voice cracked. You don't get to save us and then die. That's not how this works. You said humans finish what they start. The thrumming of engines filled the air. The rescue ship, painted with the white star of the Human Expeditionary Corps, descended through Carvol's purple sky like a metallic angel. Rhea's eyes fluttered closed. Tell them. Worth it. Every cub. Worth it, Captain Corin. The medic hit the ground running, trauma kit already open. Stay with me. That's an order. Rek refused to move even as the human medic swarmed around Rhea. She smiled, he said to no one in particular. Even when the arrows went in. She smiled. The medic, a grizzled veteran named Chen, glanced at the small Karvash cub as his team worked frantically on Rhea. Yeah, kid. That's what we do. We smile so you don't have to be scared. He attached the final medical sensor. And we don't quit. Ever. 3 hours later, in the medical bay of the HSS Indomitable, Rhea Karan opened her eyes to see 7 small faces pressed against the window of her recovery room. Vrek was in front, still holding that bloodied arrow. She smiled. The ship's commander stopped by later, reviewing the mission report. You evacuated 7 refugee cubs under heavy fire, took 3 projectile wounds, collapsed a canyon on enemy combatants and still made it to extraction. That's either the bravest or stupidest thing I've seen this year. Rhea grinned weakly from her hospital bed. Humans, sir. We specialize in both. Outside her window, Rek watched the stars streak by as the ship jumped to FTL, the arrow still clutched in his paws. One day he would tell his own cubs about the human who fell but refused to die, who smiled through pain because she wanted children to know hope. And he would tell them why. Across the galaxy, when things seemed darkest, people still said be human about it, because humans were the species crazy enough to stand when they should fall, to fight when they should flee, and to smile when any sensible species would scream.